Hey, Jordan Chariton, live Status Coup, Monday, May 24th, joined by Steve Grumbine of Real Progressives. Obviously, have to kind of throw what we were going to talk about out. Another massacre at a school. This is in Texas at the moment. 16 dead in total, 14 students, a teacher, and the shooter from the numbers I'm reading. If that changes while we're live, we'll let you know. I'm going to read from B&O News, which has been on this for about an hour or two, if you have that, Colin. A man has opened fire at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, killing at least 15 and injuring more than a dozen, local officials say. Suspect was shot dead. I don't want to say for sure, but there are reports that the suspect was a high school student who opened fire at this elementary school. An 18-year-old high school student who went and massacred children in an elementary school. The incident began just before noon when officers were called for an active shooter at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, a small community about 77 miles west of San Antonio. 3/4 of this community are Latino, so I don't know if that played a part at all, but it's a heavily Latino community. Quote, it's believed the shooter abandoned his vehicle and went into the elementary school. Gun-loving Texas Governor Greg Abbott said he shot and killed horrifically, incomprehensibly 14 students and killed a teacher. During the first few hours, local officials gave conflicting statements about where the shooting had happened and how many were shot. So in addition to 16 total dead, there's conflicting numbers, but there's also a lot of injured, and in total 30 people were shot. I don't have all the details while I'm live, but I could guarantee you this was a bazooka gun he was using to kill that many people in such quick time. And we're already seeing even corporate media, talking that this is a mental health issue. Steve, you have young kids, and I'll update you as best as I can as we get more information. But as of now, the shooter's dead. I don't know the motive, but he was an 18-year-old. I believe he was a high school student in this area who went to an elementary school shooting up elementary school kids. Your thoughts, Steve?
I've got different thoughts depending upon the direction I choose to look at this. I'm broken. I mean, it's horrible. Like, just start there. Just horrible. As a father, I sent because I knew what we were going to talk about. I sent the stuff to my significant other and said, "This is what I get to talk about tonight." And she goes, "That's my worst fear. That right there is the thing I'm most afraid of." And I mean, I can make a lot of jokes on different times about Pennsylvania and the teabaggers and all the other folks that are gun happy people. But I don't think that it's appropriate, because I think there's a larger issue at play here. The whole mental health thing is, in my opinion, I think it's missing the point. I think it's important. We need mental health in this country. We need health care of all varieties. But I got to be really honest with you. I know that most won't accept this as an answer, but I'm going to make a point. The idea of austerity and economic hopelessness is so woven into everything that's going on in this country. And you can expect a lot more of this from people that aren't necessarily mentally ill, people that are just at the breaking point. That's not mental illness. I mean, let me ask you a question, Jordan. If your wife cheats on you,
I don't want. Sorry to interrupt, but the governor announced the name of the shooter. He was an 18-year-old, Salvador Ramos. He's an 18-year-old, and I believe he went to the local high school. Quote, the shooter was Salvador Ramos, an 18-year-old male who resided in Uvalde. It is believed that he abandoned his vehicle and entered into Robb Elementary School in Uvalde with a handgun, and he may have also had a rifle, but this is not yet confirmed. According to my most recent report, he shot and killed, and then he goes through. So this was an 18-year-old high school student in Uvalde. Go on.
But the idea here is that until we satisfy the basic needs of regular people in this country, until we make, not when there's a crisis, not when someone finally snaps, not when something bad happens, but because it's the right thing to do, because the benefits far outweigh any costs that could possibly be thrown at us. We have got to fix the basic needs of every citizen and person of that's living in this country. I'm not even going to restrict it to citizens. I think every single person in this country has a right to shelter, food, basic needs as a whole. And I think that as long as people feel hopeless, their lives are hopeless. I mean, there's so many, it trickles apart. And it's not mental illness. It is literally life on life's terms. And people that don't have a chemical imbalance, just because of the situation, snap. I don't know anything about this kid, not anything. But you can see in the chat, this is just Tuesday in America. Tomorrow it'll just be Wednesday. There's nothing new under the sun here, unfortunately. A lot of sadness, a lot of dead kids, a lot of dead people in general, a dead perpetrator that will never understand the fullness of why he did it or she did it or whatever did it. And it's going to be the same thing next week and the week after. And whenever the next one happens, we'll all gather together. We'll all be sad. We'll all be, somebody will start bringing up gun control, and then you got the right wing that'll jump up, and it'll be wash, rinse, repeat. It ain't going away. I think to myself, what is the best way to quiet complaints? It's to win in sports. If you're a winning team, it washes away a lot of other things. In the United States, what do you wash away? The disgust and hate for your own country and your own self and your fellow countrymen. Make life better. Make life better for people. Don't make it a freaking Squid Game. Make life better for people. And you're not going to see this. Again, I have no idea what brought this guy to doing this. I have no idea. I don't even want to speculate. I feel disgusted and sad and just terrified for my own kids. But I can assure you right now, it's all so many of these things are wash, rinse, repeat. You do the news every day, Jordan. So, there's a million different storylines for a million different angles of things. And they all come back, every one of them, including Flint, Michigan water crisis. They all come back to two things: corruption and economics. Corruption and economics. And it drives everyone's life into the toilet. And until we have a clean New Deal to literally change and rid ourselves of corruption, and until we actually have a country that takes care of its people, this is just going to be another shooting du jour. No difference. It's going to be wash, rinse, repeat. And I think that if you play this tape back in a year from now, after we've looked at other shootings that will invariably occur, you'll see that it's true. It's unfortunate, but it's true. Until we make life worth more, until we treat people better, until we provide people with a reasonable chance for a better future, this is going to be the way it is.
Absolutely. And I have a different take. I think a lot of what you said is valid, and we don't know what the motive of this kid was. We do know in the past, a lot of these school shootings have children who either were bullied or isolated or, just normal things that happen in your childhood. Feeling socially isolated or picked on for whatever reason, or you come from a broken home or whatever the case may be. And then they, when you add that in to, they go down a rabbit hole online, things like that. So across just the epidemic of school shootings, we're talking 25 years, really, because Columbine was at the end of the 20th century. There's a lot of different reasons, whether it be economic pain, societal pain, opioids, whatever the case may be. But there's one common denominator, and we have a big audience right now. I don't really care if some of you are going to be turned off by this. There's a lot of mentally ill people in this country. There's a lot of people who aren't mentally ill, but are just in a funk. There's a lot of people who don't have an actual mental illness, but are, whether it be, alcohol or drug addiction or whatever the case may be. You can't go kill 15 kids with nunchucks. Okay. You can't go killing this amount of people at the Nevada, Las Vegas concert shooting, Newtown, the list goes on. I don't want to hear any more about mental health. There's a lot of mentally ill people in this country. The tool that allows mentally ill people to kill this many people are the guns. That's just objectively true. Not just the guns, but the magazines and how quickly they could reload or don't need to reload if they're semi-automatic weapons. That's the guns. And this governor in Texas, because he's going to put out his crocodile tears now, Greg Abbott. Well, let me take you through memory lane. If you have the tweet, Colin, this was his tweet 7 years ago. I'm embarrassed.
Lewis,
Texas #2 in nation for new gun purchases, behind California. Let's pick up the pace, Texans. That's this governor who's going to give his thoughts and prayers to this. Then you have Tony Gonzalez, who's the congressman that represents this area. My heart breaks for the city of Uvalde. Pray for our families. Quote, children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from him. Jesus said, let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. Matthew 19:14. Yeah, well, this same Jesus-loving congressman, let's see what he's tweeted in the past. The radical left wants to take away your guns. Not on my watch. Proud to defend your Second Amendment. This has been completely bastardized by the NRA, by Fox News, by, honestly, in my view, weak Democrats who don't even know how to make an argument. Anyone with an objective brain knows, yeah, there's a lot of factors that lead people to want to carry out such massacre. But logistically, you can't stab 15 people to death in just a few minutes. The tool for this mental illness, and you're never going to eradicate mental illness, whether we are in a society that, let's just have a fantasy, you had income equality. Let's say we had income equality, a wonderful environment, healthcare was a right. And people could focus. We had a 4-day work week. If things were a lot different than they are now, we still wouldn't eradicate mental illness. You still wouldn't eradicate social isolation or disturbed youth or disturbed adults. So mental illness, in my view, mental illness does not pull the trigger. The person pulls the trigger, and they usually have AR-15s or smaller guns that could do the same, or add-ons to the guns. And, I think that we also have our media to play. There was just a mass shooting in Buffalo, a week ago? Gone. No coverage. This shooting, yeah, you have coverage maybe 2-3 days before they move on, because we have mostly privileged cosmopolitan news anchors. Mostly I don't want to make generalizations, but their kids go to the best schools, probably go to private schools. They're probably removed from a lot of this. And they don't really challenge Republicans on the blood money they take. They hold remember CNN had a town hall with Marco Rubio and Parkland? They barely laid a glove on Marco Rubio. After all, the student challenged Marco Rubio on his NRA money more than any journalist ever has. So I hate to be a simpleton about this, but at the end of the day, there's one common denominator with all these. I don't care what the Republicans say. You're not going to eradicate mental illness. Of course, we should have a lot more investment in mental illness, not just about this, but literally families being evicted during a pandemic. A lot of orphans now whose parents died during this pandemic. A lot of children who got a little help in terms of poverty through the child tax credit that then expired and went back to being impoverished. I mean, the list can go on all the things that cause mental illness, social isolation. But the common denominator is the guns. And by the way, enough with these constitutionalists like Ted Cruz. Oh, the Constitution, the Second Amendment. Yeah, well, you seem to be very selective on the Constitution, because Ted Cruz and all these other gun nuts who literally infanticize the Constitution. Constitution talked about a well-regulated militia and muskets. Okay, they seem to toss out the Constitution when it's good for them. I'm no fan of President Obama, by the way, but he had a constitutional right to appoint a Supreme Court judge, Merrick Garland. Ted Cruz, who says he walks around with the Constitution in his pocket, he forgot about the Constitution then. So they don't give a shit about the Constitution. They don't care about the Second Amendment. It's used to fundraise, to keep winning elections in cultural areas. Nobody's talking about taking away your guns to hunt. Obviously, in a lot of areas of the country, it's for sport. It's a cultural thing. But you cannot have more guns than people in a country. And most sane countries like New Zealand and elsewhere, when these things happen, they take action and they do something about it, and they restrict and put heavier gun regulations. That's never going to happen here because we have feckless political leadership. Your thoughts?
Well, I agree with a lot of what you said, but I'm just going to peel it back a little bit. I was watching some television the other day, and I don't do it very often. But I was watching some television the other day, and they were talking about a guy who was going to get foreclosed on. And it wasn't one of us talking about it. It was regular TV, and they were basically making this guy out to be an asshole, that he was a loser, and if he had made better choices, he would still have a house. And then it cascaded to losing his family, and then it cascaded to a number of other things. And as I'm watching this stuff, and I'm thinking to myself, this poor sap, I have no idea what happened in his life that made him lose his job. I have no idea what happened in his life, but it's always putting the onus on the littlest of the people. It's always putting it on the there instead of the systemic issue, right? And guns, to me, are a symptom of a problem. They're a symptom of a problem. They're not the problem, although they are a problem. I want to be crystal clear. I don't want anybody to think I'm saying otherwise. What I'm telling you, though, is that every time we try to go after guns, number one, we forget the origins of this. We're baked into racist society. The idea of stripping Black and brown people of the ability to maintain and own firearms for their own protection. They were always seen as a villain, as a murderer. And so rather than consider they might want to protect themselves, the idea of gun control came in. This had nothing to do with what we're dealing with today. So I want to be clear, there's some historical stuff going on that we need to take into consideration as we weigh out this stuff. The other thing we have to look at too is, how are we going to fight that battle? This has been going on. I mean, I remember the Brady Bill. I remember all this. I remember I was in the lunchroom when Ronald Reagan got shot by Hinckley. I remember all these things and the gun stuff. And then was it Gabby Giffords or whatever her name was? So many people have come forward, and it's the same story. We've seen nothing change on that front. So after some time, you have to ask yourself, we still don't hear anything about the Nevada shooting where 50 people or whatever were wiped out. We hear nothing about most of these shootings. I think really the idea of hitting this head on and going after the symptom, which I believe is the gun, that's the symptom. I believe that doing that only reinforces the battle lines, and that it's clear the NRA has more strength than the ending the guns has strength, if you will. So talking about how do we solve these problems, I'm looking at it practically, and I'm saying to myself, we have so many issues going on that tie back to the base material conditions of the citizens of this nation. And I'm telling you, everything from healthcare to guns to housing it's all economic. Every single solitary bit of it, even the fighting at home that makes the kid feel abandoned and all the other stuff, not having the cool kid clothes at school and going to school and other kids and picking on them or whatever. That's economic. All these things every single thing boils down to economics. I swear, I'm not just a one-trick pony. I see all the stuff, but it all comes back. You got to find the root. And that's where I'm driving it. The root, if you look, you can see it around the world. It's not just localized here. You're watching this issue come about with all the other neoliberal projects that have been exported around the world, you're seeing the same exact scenarios play out. I don't know how to say this any better. It may not feel as good. Actually, it would feel great. But I really do believe that we're attacking the wrong problem. I believe this problem is an outcropping of failures, repeated failures to take care of the basic needs of society. And I know that sounds big, but I swear to God, there's answers there. It's not like it's hand waving. There are literal answers to how to solve those problems.
I think there's something to what you're saying. And by the way, to be clear, we have no idea what this particular shooter, what the motive was. I'm hoping we'll find out while we're live, but no idea. I don't know what his story was. It might have nothing to do with economics for this kid. We're talking in broad strokes just about the society rot, period, which Chris Hedges talks a lot about in terms of late stage capitalism. But I will say about what you're talking about, because you brought up the NRA. To be honest with you, the NRA has severely been weakened in recent years to the point of bankruptcy, because its president was basically using gun nuts money to go, on lavish vacations and have gold toilets and all that. To me, this goes beyond the NRA. There is a long pattern in the Republican Party and some right-wing Democrats to distract the masses, particularly Republican voters, from the fact that they're literally fucking you economically, to distract the masses from the fact that there's been a 30-year bank robbery in this country with all our money going to the top. That's our money, that income inequality chart. It started in the early 80s, to distract you from the fact that our percentage of unionized workforce went from about 40, 50% in the 1950s down to 10, 11 nationally, to distract you from the fact that essentially there is no fixed pricing. Your rent, your groceries, everything has gone up. There's been a long-lasting inflation in this country for years. It's called gentrification, i.e. economic terrorism. The media doesn't talk about that inflation, where rents have been going up for years. Everything has been going up. You put a Whole Foods in a city, watch native people that grew up there have to be forced out because the real estate developers are buying up city councils and governments. We've talked about all this. But to distract the masses from the economic Hunger Games, because we do live in the United Corporations of America, had to get that in there. We don't live in the United States of America. We live in the United Corporations of America. What do they do to distract you? Scare the living shit out of you. And that is really what this messaging is about, that they're coming for your guns. And, that congressman's tweet that I read, the radical left wants to take away your guns. It's to distract the hell out of people. To a lesser extent, DeSantis in Florida has been doing that. He wants to distract people from the fact that Florida's inflation rates are higher than the national average. He wants to distract you in Florida from the fact that property taxes through the roof in Florida, from the fact that rent has gone up 40, 50% in Tampa, Orlando, Miami. So what's he going to do? He's distracting on, oh my God, there's an epidemic of kids saying they're gay in school and teachers talking about it. Or there's an epidemic of racist math textbooks, just to name a few. And Democrats do this too. They distract on cultural issues, this and that. But that's what this gun issue is, because they have fooled and literally stoked up a whole generation, let's just call it, of white people to not focus on the fact that, your standard of living is less than it was 20 years ago. Not focus on the fact that, you probably don't get the same benefits you used to get, or you have to work 2 jobs. Not focus on any of that. They're coming for your guns. They're coming for your way of life. And that, to me, is at the root of all this, because it's a way of dividing all of us. I do agree with you that there is an indirect line to a lot of these shootings with the societal decay. The fact that our government is completely bought, the fact that people's socioeconomic conditions have drastically gone down, the fact that basically the biggest voting bloc of this country is the non-voter because of apathy based on everything we're talking about. I guess my whole point is that's a big project to fix. That's a big project to fix. Yeah, and I don't know if we will ever. So the one constant is there's a lot of different reasons people take up these guns to go killing people. But I haven't seen an epidemic of them doing it with knives, nunchucks, or anything like that. So that's my point. We could talk about the root causes, but, you know, obviously we're seeing with COVID, our government doesn't particularly, at a certain point, doesn't care about. I mean, we were having 3,000 people dying a day. The media stopped covering it. So there's a multiple number of problems, and I'm not trying to be one note, you know, on gun control. But my point is, at the end of the day, if you're a parent, yeah, there's a lot of reasons for this. But what are you going to focus on? The fact that an 18-year-old in this instant was able to get a gun and go shoot up, you know, 15 kids, probably relatively quickly.
Yeah, I all I can say is this: we have a bunch of crises happening all at one time, literally at all one time. And Ukraine and Russia probably doesn't impact you and I in a very like here and now kind of thing, but it's got everyone's attention. Okay. You look around at like college student debt, things like that, probably not affecting everybody, but it's affecting enough people, and it's happening right here, right now. But more importantly, we've got an existential climate crisis going on that keeps getting diverted from as well. And so you say solving those other things is a really big deal. How do we solve this? And I'm saying to you, if we've got 8 years to solve the climate crisis, and part of that is solving the things I just said, then what do you know? We might actually be able to solve a lot of these problems if we focus on the root, which is addressing the economic lack of opportunity, the lack of sustainable living, the lack of hope in this country in general. And honestly, I don't know how to say it any better than this. Just because it didn't test well in a poll doesn't make it the wrong answer. Right now, I don't see anyone, including AOC or any of them, talking about either a Green New Deal. I don't see any of them meaningfully talking about Medicare for all. I don't see any of them meaningfully talking about any of these issues.
Oh, they talk about it. I don't see them fighting or doing it.
I don't see them fighting for it. A tweet on something doesn't mean shit to me. I'm saying in general, though, every time, like, okay, so this will go away in a couple days, and then something else will happen. Somebody will steal something, or somebody will burn a building down, or somebody will be found to have lied, or so, and it'll be all the talk for a day and a half. My point is that while all these pop-up things happen, there's a sustaining issue that's going on, and that is this environmental crisis that ties in with all the other hopelessness that goes with the economic system and so forth. Again, I know it's hard to wrap it around that. I know it's hard to stay focused when, God damn, this thing's flaring over here and that's flaring over there. But the fact is that if we don't stay committed to the root cause, these things will just be pop-ups, and we'll be continuing to playing bop-a-mole, whack-a-mole, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just saying, let's just go for the kill zone, which is the real kill zone, which is a Green New Deal. Knock the inequality out of the mix. Start getting rid of student debt. Start doing the things that allow people to have freedom. And again, you're right. They use this as a campaign thing. That's exactly what they do to keep power and divide people up. But there's so many ways of that being done. Until I know why this kid did what he did, until I understand the specifics of this is just conjecture. We're just coming up with some good ideas. But
well, I think there's something else, and we got a big audience. There might be a lot of you that are new to this channel, so subscribe. But we talk about this a lot. You're talking about what's at the root of all this. There's also another thing at the root of this. We don't live in a country anymore. We live in a multi-trillion-dollar corporate conglomerate.
Yes.
Known as the United Corporations of America. People think I'm joking. I'm not joking. Our politicians, and Steve, I think you agree with this, they're not the ones making the decisions. They work for the donors. They work for the donors. So all the things we're talking about are under the assumption that we actually have a government that is willing to address these problems. We don't. The majority of Republicans and Democrats spent the majority of their time at a separate location outside of Congress, dialing donors for dollars and worrying about their reelection, because you have elections every 2 years if you're a congressperson. So other countries, there's corruption wherever you go, but other countries their governments are not literally purchased. Yeah, there's special interests here and there, but not like it is here. So at the end of the day, until you address the root rot, which is our government has been sold. It started in the 1970s. For those of you that don't know, there was a Supreme Court ruling and other things that loosened the regulations on money in politics. So it started allowing corporations to dump endless amounts of money. The first PAC, forget Super PAC, the first PAC was in the 1970s. So then you have Reagan come in, the union busting, globalization, which is really just Wall Street and corporations writing trade deals that sold our jobs to China and Mexico. I want China and Mexico to have jobs, but not at the expense, of workers here either. But we basically have had a 40-year takeover of our government by corporations, pharmaceutical companies, oil companies, Wall Street, Silicon Valley. The list goes on and on. So the politicians are essentially willingly restrained on doing anything. Biden, even if he wanted to do something on gun control or anything like that, he's not going to be able to, because the Republicans won't do anything. And frankly, I don't even think the Democrats fully have the spine to do what is necessary. When you had a pandemic, for example, when 3,000 people were dying a day, you didn't have vaccines, you couldn't even get universal health care in this country. That's what we're talking about, because the donors do not want even the door to be opened just a little bit. That's why Biden's not going to cancel student debt, because if you cancel student debt, guess what? The people are going to say, wow, we did this. Now let's turn our sights on Medicare for all. Now let's, you get momentum. The donors don't want that. They don't want to change the system. And it's directly tied to this, because the reason Republicans, in addition to what I talked about, which is fear sells and keeps them in power, they don't have anything economic to run on, so they run on fear. But they're also bribed by gun manufacturers, by the NRA and others. So that's a broader question, and that's what you and I have talked about often. We need a general strike in this country, because it's all connected. You have a general, which is not going to happen overnight. I don't want to lie to anyone and say we're going to have a general strike overnight. But look at George Floyd, for example. For different reasons, it was over police brutality. We had a mass mobilization of millions of people across generation, class, marching. So it is possible in America to have mass mobilization. Imagine if even 10% of those people that were out protesting for George Floyd protested with their wallets too. You'd start seeing change real quick. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like very much to see us take the thing that we fought for Bernie Sanders for, without Bernie. I love you, Bernie. Goodbye. Without Bernie, and just say, these are our demands. This is what Occupy Wall Street did, minus the demands. They didn't have the demands. They didn't have things set up in the right way. But in my opinion, you take the framework for that Green New Deal and all the things that we just talked about, getting rid of corruption, add that in there, and make it, this is non-negotiable. Sorry, shit libs, you are not going to get to cave in on this. Sorry, folks that just want to go back to brunch, you don't get to cave in on this. This is something that we've got to stand together and not wait for them to give us permission to fight for our lives. Jordan, I listen to you and I say to myself, I know you're coming from a good place, and I love almost everything you're saying. What I'm not hearing, and I want to hear, where I want us to be like closer on, is understanding that the model that has created the very things that you just talked about, the United Corporations of America, this is neoliberalism. And you can go back all the way to the turn of the century, the 19th century, that is, with Vladimir Lenin. We'll bring old Lenin from the grave. Lenin talked about global finance capital even then. This is nothing new, but we didn't address it then. He tried, he wrote about it. A lot of people tried through the years and wrote about it, but people stop. They forget. They have built-in forgetters that make them stop thinking about that stuff. And they suddenly start getting mad at the fly on their arm, instead of realizing that there's some asshole over there with a shit factory that's producing flies like crazy. We're worried about this one fly, but the real fly is over there at the shit factory. And so what I'm trying to say is this: all these things are part of a layer cake that we need to demand. We need to make demands, and we need to organize around. But I'm telling you, if we focus on the symptoms, we'll neither fix the main problem nor will we get the satisfaction we'd like from fixing the symptom. I've gotten to the point now where it's almost like PTSD with the wash, rinse, repeat with these events. And I'm saying to myself, it's got to end. And the only way it's going to end is to stop putting our hope in people that sell us out in terms of Congress. Love them all to death, think they're great, maybe great dancer, but they're certainly not producing legislation that solves these problems. So that tells us something. The idea of going through doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is another form of insanity. And we're all participating in that. What I'm suggesting is we've got to organize outside the duopoly, and we've got to organize around the very core principles that we all said we wanted and not make them negotiable, and don't give up until we get them. Because if we don't do that, we have a very finite period of time on this planet, and all the guns could be removed. When the tsunami hits you, you're not going to give a shit about guns. I promise you. That's going to be the last thing on your mind.
Well, I think there's a much bigger problem that I've been talking about for years. Okay. So if you're new to this, if you're not new to this channel, you've heard this quite often. There's a broader problem because there's a lot of people who protest, Steve. They protest outside of politicians' offices. They protest outside of corporations' offices, right? And that's all good. How many people protest outside of media outlets? How many people protest outside CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, local media? I could tell you, if you're new to this channel, I've been to Flint, Michigan nearly 20 times. It's the biggest government cover-up of the 21st century, the Flint water crisis and the cover-up. Do you know 8 years later, they still have toxic water in Flint? Don't listen to what the media has told you. I've gone there nearly 20 times. The water is still toxic. Do you know how many times that I had scandalous information that I got from the criminal investigation, and I reached out to larger networks to publish it, and they literally did nothing. They told me, yeah, this won't sell. Nobody cares anymore. Literally about a community that's drinking toxic water. They didn't want to break news about the governor who literally lied about, he knew about the toxic water for 16 months, and he said nothing as people were killed drinking it. So we have a media in this country that are not, for the most part, are not journalists as much as basically participants in sports, political sports. So most of these journalists, they're very disconnected from the actual community suffering in this country. Most of our journalism is concentrated in New York, DC, Chicago, LA. And on the local media end, it's all owned by corporations. So that's why when you have completely earth-shattering things like 10 dead in Buffalo and based on a racist shooter, or 16 dead in Texas, they move on after 2 days. That's why, as you said, it's the same rinse and repeat script. There's not going to be anything new from this coverage. It's going to be a play-by-play, look at the shooter, thoughts and prayers, maybe some talk about will anything change, and then they'll move on. That's why when literally during a pandemic, people are being evicted from their homes, because we had the bullshit coming from the White House that there was a moratorium. I went on the road and I literally exposed thousands of people were being evicted despite the federal moratorium during a deadly pandemic. That's why when Flint and other places have toxic water, there's no coverage. Why? Because we have a media in this country owned by corporate America. Most of these major media are owned by multi-billion-dollar corporate conglomerates that their model is to ignore the rot, is to ignore everything we're talking about here and pick one or two stories, pick some conflict, pick sensationalism. Hell, remember when Bernie Sanders had 30,000 people at rallies talking about a lot of the things we're talking about? Was the media showing that? And this doesn't matter if you don't, it doesn't matter if you like Bernie Sanders or not. It doesn't matter if you support Bernie or not. Objectively, for a news story, if you have 30,000 people at a rally for Bernie Sanders, right? I remember I was at Washington Square Park in New York City. Bernie had 28,000 people inside the park. And when you add around the park, there was 40,000 people in New York City. They barely covered it. What were they covering? An empty podium of Trump for 45 minutes. So while I was there with 30,000 people, they barely covered it and they showed an empty podium. So why do you think nothing changes? Because literally you have a media ecosystem nationally, locally, And that's why we have Elaine here. Because for those of you that don't know, if you're brand new, we mostly cover things on the ground. We mostly do something radical and leave the studio. I've been to Flint nearly 20 times. We've done road trips during the pandemic to talk to people that are struggling. We cover elections on the ground. We cover a lot of things on the ground, homelessness, evictions. I covered many names of Black men that were murdered that you've never heard of and didn't trend. And it's expensive to do this. That's why, thankfully, we're growing thanks to people signing up as members. But the point is, when you have media that literally lies every day, pushes out narratives that no, voters won't go for an actual progressive candidate. Voters won't go for an actual candidate that wants to do something about rising costs, wants to do something about healthcare. No, they don't want that. They want someone more practical. They want someone more pragmatic. Remember when we were facing Donald Trump and the prospects of him again, the media kept lying that no, Joe Biden is the only pragmatic candidate that could defeat Donald Trump. Joe Biden won by the skin of his teeth. He didn't win by that much in the Electoral College. And you look at the polls, very few people voted for Joe Biden. People voted to get rid of Trump. So the point is, people just sleep on the media and say, oh, well, let's protest the politicians and the corporations. Who the hell do you think is propping up the politicians and the corporations? The media. Right. It is insane. If a mass shooting like this happened pretty much anywhere else, it would be covered probably for a month with very little else covered. Here, you're lucky if you're going to get 3 days. And until people start paying attention, because I've seen it on the road, people are desperate for journalists and media to pay attention to real issues. Even independent media is too often doing hot takes and food fights with each other. I covered on the road for a year, Steve, when nobody was paying attention, the strikes. We went to Iowa. We covered John Deere workers striking. We went to Buffalo. We covered the Starbucks workers trying to unionize before they won. We covered hospital workers in Buffalo on strike. We covered the Amazon workers for a year outside that warehouse before anyone else was paying attention. And the point is, we cover it because very few others are. But at the end of the day, until people realize that their media, their local media and the national media is propping up this system, and until people start going as many numbers protesting outside these media outlets and shaming them, I don't know how much is going to change.
Yeah, I remember, for those of you who don't know, I used to be a right winger, guys and gals. I did. I used to be a right winger.
A bushy
at that. Yeah. And I'm telling you this because I want you to understand where this is coming from. I stood on the 9th floor of the Comcast building in Center City, Philadelphia, where I was a director at Comcast. I mean, I was not low level. I was a director in their headquarters there in Philadelphia. And it was in 2012. And I'm watching as the entire lobby is filled with Occupy Wall Street. I'm watching as the entire building is encompassed, just absolutely enveloped in people. There's drums out there. There's people sitting in the lobby. Literally, there's stairs that go all around. They're sitting all up and down the stairs. There's nowhere to move. And I remember thinking, what the hell are these idiots doing? Because, I was a right winger at the time. I realized something after I watched this later. As I watched this later, I realized they didn't have demands. They didn't have the demands. They had the numbers. They had everything, but they didn't have demands. And because they didn't have demands, it made them look not as cool and strong and awesome as they could have been. I'm saying to you, that was at Comcast. That is one of the biggest media giants in the world. And they're sitting there throughout the building, throughout the courtyard, around the streets, everywhere, all throughout Philadelphia. It was amazing in retrospect. I only wish that I appreciated it then as much as I do today. As I look back and I think about it today, I say to myself, folks, that is what we're missing. We need that now. We need that now. If you want to get rid of violence in the streets, we the people are suffering, folks. Those people up top, they love these kinds of destruction. They love this because it gives them ammo to stay in power. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Anybody that listens to me knows I don't play in the conspiracy realm, but I will tell you one that doesn't take a lot of reach to get a hold of. The Democrats had every chance to get Ruth Bader Ginsburg the hell out of there and put a Supreme Court justice in there long ago. Several times could have done it. Joe Biden could have stacked the court when he took over with a freaking loaded House, and he had the tipping vote in the Senate. Could have stacked the Supreme Court if this was a big deal. They didn't do it. Why didn't they do it? Well, now that the Republicans have shown their ass with Roe v. Wade, you're going to see where I'm tying this together. They now have something to run on to keep you afraid, because after all, the Republicans are going to repeal Roe v. Wade. The conservative justices are. This right here, all these distractions are meant to keep us from doing another Occupy Wall Street. They're meant to keep us divided over literally microaggressions and tons of other little things. Not that this is inconsequential, because the right to choose is fundamental. Okay. But the issue comes down to, we don't have the willingness, we don't have any kind of energy to organizing another Occupy Wall Street. And the type of work that it would take behind the scenes is legendary to get it going. If we don't do that, you could show up to CNN with 5 people with their John 3:16 sign, and it's going to do absolutely nothing. You go up there with Occupy Wall Street, 20,000 people in the streets, literally, you're going to get some attention. And that's what OWS did. OWS was able to get attention. And it's probably the only way we're going to get attention going forward, because this whole idea that we're going to vote our way there and that we're going to shame Biden and he's suddenly going to do something different, and it's not happening. It's literally not happening without a huge, massive force of numbers. And Jordan, I know that you know that.
I just want to cut in.
Sure.
Gunman who opened fire at Texas school shot his grandmother before going to the school. Oh, wow. No word on her condition. So this gets worse by the minute. So this is from BNO News, and he shot his grandmother before going to school. I don't know if she's alive or not. I'm also reading that according to local radio reports down in Texas, where this school shooting was, this was the third last day. So there's only 3 more days of school. So imagine being a parent down there. This was the third to last day of school. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, we've talked about all this. Not a clue what was going on with this kid. It might have zero to do with the economy. Who knows? But there is a societal rot in this country that you've hit on, Steve, and I agree with. And it's affecting young people. You got to remember also, we're separated by, I think, 15, 20 years, but my generation, millennials, we came up under the Iraq war, the financial crash, right? Now a pandemic. We basically, from the get-go, didn't have the same opportunities that our grandparents had. We couldn't go to college for like $50 tuition. A lot of us, I mean, not me, but a lot of us were basically forced out of our homes due to foreclosures and the financial crash. A lot of us have dealt with basically all these Wall Street infused bubbles popping, screwing us. And then a pandemic where, you got like a $2,000 check, a $1,400 check, some unemployment, and then a nice kick in the ass. So, there's a lot of young people in this country for a variety of reasons being radicalized. You have an extremist Republican Party that is now embracing straight on fascism. And you also have a Democratic Party that embraces other forms of fascism, because this fascism is not one thing. There's white supremacy fascism, neo-Nazi fascism, corporate fascism. I was at Standing Rock, freezing my ass off, being shot at along with indigenous people. I was there on and off for 6 months. That was fascism. And there was a Democratic president at the time who said, let it play out. Obama said, let it play out, as indigenous people were getting grenades shot at them, mace, freezing water, rubber bullets, etc. Obama was president during Ferguson and Baltimore. Obviously, Trump, we know, embraced fascism. So I guess what I'm getting at here is, to me, I think we need to look very closely, whatever your persuasion is, whether you're left, right, neither. I think we really need to look at what these workers have been doing for the last year. The workers that have went on strike, a record number, they call it the great reset? Record number of workers quitting at these jobs. Union drives that are forming. Workers in Alabama, coal miners, have literally been on strike for a year. And the only reason they've been able to even float, because obviously they need to make money for their families, is community mutual aid. I really think we need to look at that. A lot of the masses are done waiting for the government to do something for them. They're taking it into their own hands, and apply that to other things. Because to me, it's not going to cut it anymore. You mentioned Occupy. One-day protests for student loans, one-day protests. God bless the Parkland students who got, I think it was tens of thousands of people for that gun protest in D.C. A day of protest is not going to do anything. Yeah, they'll let you protest. The oligarchs, the corporations, they'll let you protest because they know you're going home the next day. And the extent of your protest after that is just going to be hashtags. But actual organizing across the board in your community, there's tenant unions popping up to face this evictions. There are local groups forming for economic types of protests. There are local groups forming for divestment campaigns to force banks to divest from fossil fuel companies. It's not hard to find in your community unless you're in like a rural community or something like that. But most major communities, you could find local groups that are fighting for something. And I really think people need to start looking at what these Amazon workers did, the Starbucks workers, the John Deere workers, the Nabisco workers, Frito-Lay. In New Jersey right now, there's a hospital on strike. There's a lot more hospital workers striking. We got to take it into our own hands. I'm not talking about violence, but we really have to take it into our own hands.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think that organizing, educating each other, getting us ready. I think, one of the radicalizing things, a good radicalizing, right? I'm all about radicalizing people, man. I want to radicalize people. I want people to wake up and smell what's going on and not keep going back to sleep. Definitely want that. But I think that one of the most powerful things that we can do is realize that our ability to talk to one or two people, three people, like that snowflake idea, the idea that we're all touching each other, the idea of us, each one teach one, each one reach one, and start that network growing. I think that right there is key to all of this because, people do feel powerless, man. This is too big for any one of us to do. I don't care how much money you got. It's too big. It's way too big. When you start digging deeper and deeper, you realize it's fucking huge. So people get overwhelmed with that. I get it. I mean, I really do get it. But I also see the visionary aspect of this. And I really do believe that, you look at multi-level marketing, and I hate to even think of it like that, but you see it with crypto even. We as people, if we network and we do that multi-level thing and we start growing our sphere of influence and start growing each other's sphere of influence and start bringing them all together so that we're coalescing around a common narrative. And it can't just be one thing because we'll end up just being a bunch of splintered orphan politics. Might feel good, but it ain't getting you what you need. We need massive numbers tied together, shared across. And that's where the intersectional movement comes in, recognizing all those different aspects. And that's why I hearken back to that platform. Let that platform be our uniting thing, because every one of those things has somebody's name on it, something that's going to get them interested in stepping out and taking a risk. And it's going to take risk. I think that's the hard part. It's not good enough. It feels good to be sitting here, got a microphone. I'm talking to Jordan Chariton, somebody who I looked up to tremendously during 2016 election. You're a friend of mine now, but I still look up to you. I think to myself, this is a very privileged position to have the microphone to be talking and expounding upon these ideas. Everybody's got this opportunity. If we go out together and collectively work together, the ability to maximize your voice by just telling a friend, telling two friends, telling three friends, and growing and making people realize that we together can make this happen. We together can change this. I mean, whether we can or not is another story. It's really a matter of, we know we can't do it if we don't try. That much we can guarantee. We know we can't do it. But if we could somehow or another generate the kind of camaraderie and be able to share knowledge, important knowledge, and be able to teach each other and directionally focus that massive movement at the media, at the government, at the corporations, at the lobbyists. I mean, the guy I interviewed on Let's Get Ready to Grumble a few weeks ago, Eric Kessner's out there harassing lobbyists and stuff as a soloist. Now they're getting ready to meet every Saturday at noon in DC to kind of gather people together for Medicare for All, Green New Deal, and so forth. So there is activity. It's just minor blips on the radar. They're not going to register anything. It takes massive numbers. And we're not in the pandemic anymore. Even if you have to mask up, we need to find a way to get out there and do this stuff. Otherwise, it's going to keep happening, Jordan. I mean, it's going to keep happening. It's like, what wash, rinse, repeat cycle are we going to go through next? Because if we don't change it, if we don't freaking throw a wrench in the gears and change the narrative, it's going to stay the same. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and more impossible to fight back against. I mean, I wish we could have fought back against it before all the weapons of mass destruction and all the drones and everything else. I mean, a guy could sit there and take out an activist with a drone sitting on the John. I mean, he doesn't even need to be, it's ridiculous how outgunned we are. So it requires cerebral thinking. It requires a movement, and it requires mass numbers. And
Well,
I
just,
hope that we can make it work from media.
I'll just circle back, because we're talking about the root of it all. Colin, if you have it, there's an election in Texas today. It's between Henry Cuellar, hope I'm pronouncing his name right, and Jessica Cisneros. Henry Cuellar is an anti-choice, corrupt. He's under FBI investigation. Cisneros, young 29-year-old progressive. Who knows how this shooting is going to affect the election today. But there's a Democrat right there. Colin, put it back up. After a previous shooting. Yeah, I'm not giving my NRA money back. So whether it's Democrats, whether it's Republicans, whether it's gun money, whether it's big pharma money, whether it's Silicon Valley money, real estate money, Wall Street money, our government is purchased. So if we're ever going to get what we're talking about, which is a worker-led movement across the board, that has to be one of the main political targets, which is we got to get the money out of this system. Money is the root of all evil, in my opinion. We need term limits too, which we haven't talked about. But not a lot is going to change unless we actually change the dynamic where we have a government that represents actual people rather than donors and corporations. Because when you're in that system, all you're going to get is a theatrical game. We always talk about theater. We're going to have a theatrical game. You know, every election, we've talked about this. You ever notice they call every election, this is the most important election of our lifetime. Democracy itself is on the line. No. And the bottom line is, and people forget this, how many parents need to lose children?
Yeah.
There are parents literally right now in unimaginable pain, crippling pain. I'm not a parent yet, but I can't imagine. There are parents on a rolling basis losing children because of our collective sickness. So maybe whatever your point is, whether you are pro-Second Amendment, whether you want tighter gun control, whether you think it's mental health, whatever, take a step back from whatever your position is. We have to actually start putting, Republicans, the sanctity of life. Let's start putting the sanctity of life, not just in the womb, outside the womb, because life is precious. But essentially, we have a government that doesn't care a lot about life. And by the way, there's a lot more people dying outside of a pandemic and these shootings of hunger, of lack of health care. We're going to have a lot of climate refugees in the next 5 to 10 years. So yeah, I think we're going in circles, but at the end of the day, we have a corrupt system. I think it's not one thing. I think it is, in terms of logistically, I think the guns are what are killing these people as a matter of what is the device killing all these people. But I agree that the underlying rot and decay, that is the accelerator, so to speak. But to me, people need to realize, because we've had conversations about nihilists and this and that, it's not hopeless. It's not hopeless.
No.
We can come together. And we can come together, but it's going to take people kind of taking a step back, getting outside of whatever your hard and fast position is. Because the internet, especially YouTube, is basically people who think in absolutes, and a growing trend of people, oh, I'm unsubscribing if you say anything I disagree with, which is a really toxic mentality. And I'd like to see it stop. It's okay to disagree. We don't have to fucking agree with every little thing on politics, on guns, or anything like that. But literally, it is within us if people come together and organize. So, yeah, let me read some super chats because some of them are questions. Carlin, $10. Thanks. I appreciate your content. Thank you. Ozzy, $1.99. Keep up the good work. Thank you. Double K, $49.99. Thanks so much. Marco Smith, $5. Gun crazy Texas will deliberately deflect to blame feckless Biden's handling of the border situation. Yeah. I mean, I have no idea what this shooter's motive is, but they'll probably find a way to blame it on Biden and the border. Noble Brown, $9.99. He is so right. When people could eat, have a place to sleep, and have a sense of peace, it's not chess, it's checkers. Thank you for saying this. I think he's talking about you, Steve. Double K, $19.99. Love the United Corporations of America. Well, we do have that shirt in the Status Coup store. That's all I'll say because I don't want to sell off of a tragedy. But you can go to the statuscoup.com/store if you want the United Corporations of America shirt. Tony Dowis, $5. Hey, guys, when I saw the news, honest to God, I thought they were talking about past shooting sprees. I can't keep up. Seriously. D. Nord, we need gun control now. Amber Lee Grigo, 8. Right, the economy exacerbates this, correct? Denise, $20. What do you think about a bill that would require psych evaluations for everyone before they're handed a gun or position of power? Too many personality disorders have run amok, in my opinion. Hey, can we add that to police? Yeah. Can we add that to police? Absolutely. It's crazy. You need to pass a test to drive a car, right? It's not a psych evaluation, but you got to pass a driving test. Why wouldn't you need to pass not just a shooting test, but make sure that you are well equipped mentally to carry a gun? We can't even get background checks. So good luck with that. Good luck with that. But I completely agree with that. I don't know what you think, Steve.
No, I mean, look, I think all these things are good ideas, but it's just a matter of where you put your first step, right? Which direction you're going, because you can't do everything at once. So you've got to kind of layer it in. The masses have to be activated, Jordan. That's the bottom line. Anything I can do to get people to believe that they can take part in civic, resistance, I'm willing to do. I'm open to just about any form of it that doesn't involve doing something stupid. I'm very, and stupid is defined differently by different people, but I'm genuinely, I'm a cerebral guy. I want to see us take direct action, and I want to see us do it in a way that is not just a one-off protest. Here we go, another protest. I joke about it a lot. I got the sign, got the selfie, got the T-shirt, etc. Hey, I remember I was at that protest, and I mean, that's all good and well, but it really needs to be more than a protest. That's why I harken back to Occupy, because Occupy was a consistent droning on. Obviously it was infiltrated. Obviously you had a lot of CIA spooks and other stuff doing things to disrupt the natural flow of activism, which you can expect. If you're a student of revolution, you understand there's always a counter-revolutionary force, even if it's not revolution in terms of it's revolution in terms of mental. It's revolution in terms of I'm not accepting what you're feeding me and standing your ground. And I think that whatever it takes to get people to do that, I'm on board with. I think that right there, I've watched the other stuff too much, man. I sat there and literally round the clock watching elections and freaking out and stuff like that. And I'm at a point now where, to your point, we got to get the money out of politics, but you have to ask yourself, is the structure that we're living in, is the society that we're living in fixable in the way that we want to fix it? Or is it always just going to be middling along? Can this be reformed? It's always been the question, going back, way back, reform or revolution. You got to ask yourself, can you find it within yourself to join with other people and fight back and stand your ground and say, I've had enough, and mean it, and literally stay on point and not deviate, not wander around, but literally stay on point. That's what it's going to take. I don't know any other way around it, Jordan, period. I mean, there's too many fires to put out to do anything other than come together and fight as a full 99%. And that was what was beautiful about OWS. It truly was the 99. And that's what we need. I mean, there's my mic drop. That's it. That's what we need, is another OWS. Short of that, I don't know what else we're going to do. You can sit there and bang on for a candidate, and I'm sure that's a worthwhile endeavor. I voted, here at the most recent primary here in Pennsylvania. It's not like I'm saying don't. I'm just saying the bang for the buck is going to literally be uniting and reinvigorating OWS. OWS people, if you're out there, help. Let's get this mother going. Let's make it happen, man. That's where my head's at.
Let me read two more. Brandon, $5. Hey guys, how do you guys convince your enlightened centrist coworkers when they think neoliberal earworms are the actual problem with the country? I don't really have any enlightened centrist coworkers. We're all pretty left. But how do you convince your enlightened centrist coworkers when they think neoliberal earworms are the actual problems? I would start showing your enlightened centrist coworkers some actual content outside of MSNBC or whatever they're frequenting. Because I got news for you. My dad watches Fox News. My dad is basically a one-issue voter, and that's Israel. Major Zionist. I love him, but we don't agree on Israel. But when I show him some of the stuff I cover, whether it's Flint, Standing Rock, people getting evicted during a pandemic, you know what his first question is? And this is a Republican. How come Fox isn't covering this? How come CNN's not covering this? So most people, my slogan, most people are not actually lacking compassion. Most people have no fucking idea what is actually happening in this country. And that goes back to the media. Most people have no clue what's going on. From water contamination to people being evicted to people working 3 jobs, especially people in urban cities like New York City, DC. No, not a clue. They live in a bubble. So best advice, stuff some leftist independent media down their throat. That's right. Peacefully. I know you got to go, Steve, so I'll be quick. Marco, $5 just for the heck of it. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Steve, tell people where they could find your work.
Yeah, please check me out Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the Rogue Scholar on our Real Progress in Action YouTube channel. Please subscribe to Real Progress in Action. Need you there. Obviously, I do a podcast released every Saturday called Macro and Cheese. You can find that at realprogressives.org. And follow me on Twitter, please, at SD Grumbine. I go as austerity is murder. And thank you, Jordan, as always, for teeing up a great topic. I'm sorry that it had to be such a shitty deal. I mean, I've had enough negative news, man, but it's just going to keep getting more negative until we make it stop. And that's what I'm hoping we can do, man. So thanks for having me on, as always, buddy.
Absolutely. Take care. And
right, see you later, everyone.
Before I go, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. We cover a lot of stories, both investigative and on the ground. I should have said, but we actually have a reporter who's on the ground there right now, trying to interview people in Texas. He was actually on his way to a campaign event tonight because it's an election. Today's the election between Henry Cuellar and Jessica Cisneros, but he turned around and went to this school. So Lewis right now is heading over to do interviews and get footage from this tragedy. So we'll have that for you tomorrow. And if you're new here, we're basically the only independent outlet that actually goes out on the ground to cover important stories. So definitely check us out. If you're new here, subscribe. And if it's within your means, support us, statuscoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 a month. And as a member, you get access to our monthly call with our members through Zoom. We just had our monthly call through Zoom. We have a Discord channel for our members, as well as behind the scenes videos for members when we're on the ground. I was just traveling, covering an election. I might be covering a nurses' strike in 2 days. So definitely sign up and consider supporting us at statuscoup.com/join. And if you can't support us financially, sign up for our text list. so you get a text message every time we're live, because a lot of times YouTube does not notify you when we're live. So that's statuscoup.com/text. It's free, and you'll get a text message when we're live. So just go to statuscoup.com/text, and our website is statuscoup.com. Thanks for watching. Sorry it was on this topic, and have a good night.